Breakfast.
The voice of the creative economy.
With Vincent Heeringa.
Yes, from Idealogue magazine, idealogue.co.nz. G'day there, Vincent.
Good morning, Wammo.
Good morning. Now, let's talk about where the government is headed with spending over the next year, because we're
Talk about economics,
talking
shall
about
we?
economics, but not in a really boring, flat way. Vincent. Because of course, Bill English is starting to lower people's expectations about what they can expect from the budget, and people are calling it the zero budget.
The zero budget. It's worse than the black budget.
Yeah.
The zero budget. What a thing to be remembered for. I was the zero guy.
Yeah, I was the guy who disappointed everyone with big fat zeros. Mm.
The problem that the government faces, but all governments face this around the world, and is what do? Do you prime the pump with spending, or do you cut back and save money? And we know that the economy is flatlining, where it may even be negative. So there's no growth coming from the private sector, and with the blows of the earthquake in Christchurch, 2 earthquakes in Christchurch, the tsunami and catastrophe that has happened in Japan, ongoing problems in the Middle East, we know that the economic forces are all combining to make the next year very tough for all of us.
Yeah, I was saying this the other day that 2008, the whole big crash happened, and we were thinking, oh, it's going to be grim in 2009, and sure enough, pretty grim. And then things felt like they were starting to improve last year, but
yes.
Man, this year, feels like darker days ahead.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? And I think you particularly feel it when you are in the business of selling advertising, as I am doing. A good part of my time is trying to generate advertising, and the answer universally is, sorry mate, no budget. We've got nothing to spend. We're desperate to grow. We're desperate to sell our stock, but we've got not enough people buying stuff.
Mm.
There are little pockets of activity going on. I think the tech sector is actually doing okay. There are parts of the business world where there's sort of pent-up frustration with the lack of spending, and eventually, you have to replace that computer, you have to replace that phone system. So there's a bit of that kind of activity. But overall, it feels like, as a business person, I really feel like not much has changed since 2009.
That is slightly depressing, because that's not what we were talking about on the show, you and me, towards the end of last year. I'm pretty sure we were starting to feel quite positive.
Yeah, well, all the indications were good, weren't they? We were, as a business, anecdotally it felt good. As a economy, there were signs of growth. And I don't want to be overly negative, Wammo. There are still lots of areas that are doing fantastically well. Like the farmers are actually going well. Lamb, wool, milk is going okay. But overall, the economy's flatlining, and so we have to face the decision as voters, and we will be presented in this year's election, I think, with two quite stark choices. Now, one is represented by Bill English in one corner who will say, well, it's just like Granny. When there was no money, no food in the cupboard, we ate bread. Mm. And so he'll go with an austerity approach. And the other will be, on the other side will be the left. Whether it's Phil Goff, I don't know, but saying, well, at times like this, it's time for the granny to actually reach in and give the family what they need, decent food, and kind of prime the economy with doing things like spending money on bridges and roads and infrastructure type activity.
Where do you think the government should head? Because some people are saying that if they're not spending, they're not going to put the money out there, and put the money into beneficiaries' hands as well, including people at the bottom of the ladder.
Yes.
Then we're just going to dip further into a recession.
It feels to me like an ongoing discussion that I've had kind of with myself, and economists have, they swing from, broadly one school represented by the kind of neoliberal Chicago school, which says, well, government should be small, the private sector should be calling the shots on the economy, to Keynesian, which says, well, no, there are times when the government actually does need to dip in and keep things going, and doing things like cutting benefits and reducing the state sector and reducing government spending actually just exacerbates the problem. And this is the moment where the government needs to actually keep people employed, keep the tills and the supermarkets going, keep people being able to afford to buy televisions and cars and so forth. And so that's the dilemma that we are going to face as voters around the economy, and the economy will be the major issue this year. There'll be no other issues, maybe race relations, but largely speaking it's around the economy this year.
Is the problem here, though, with our political system in that in situations like this, rather than conducting sound economic policy, all we get is ideology? And that's on both sides of the spectrum, from Labour or from National. They see a time of extreme crisis as not as a time to let's put everything aside, let's put politics aside, and let's try to work things out for the best for everyone. Rather than doing that, in comes the ideology, the agenda.
A similar thing that happens with the earthquake, insofar as you feel like, or you suspect that Jerry Brownlee would love to not have the Resource Management Act to deal with.
Yeah.
And here was an opportunity to actually railroad some things through.
Yeah.
And it's never quite clear, is it? Because you actually do need to railroad some things through. Things have got to happen fast. But the very things that have protected a lot of people in buildings in Christchurch are things like the building codes and the Resource Management Act, which forces people to be accountable for their decisions, both in a democratic and in a technical sense. So railroading things through may indeed create problems further down the road. And the suspension or the overriding authority given to one man to rebuild Christchurch does imply a certain amount of danger.
Because it's funny, because it's the problems that we were talking about, particularly, say, with Christchurch and Canterbury, before the earthquake, before September last year, those problems haven't gone away. We're talking about, water, the overuse of, the intensive use of the land, the nitrogen runoff, all that stuff is still going to exist. So you may rebuild Christchurch, it's going to be this flash wee city, but it'll be pumping crap water up from its reservoirs. Some of this stuff isn't going to go away, but then that isn't what the government is tackling either. No,
well, what you'd hope, I suppose, is that at the same time as rebuilding Christchurch, it would be built on a more sustainable basis, so that using the best and smartest technology for water retention and for heat capture and for insulation and so forth, so that the buildings and the homes that are built to the highest spec with regard to the green home, just, and it doesn't even have to be green homes, does it? It just has to be simple things like make sure they're insulated, make sure that they can capture the sun to keep warm, and reuse the water and minimise waste and so forth.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe that will happen. I suspect not under Jerry Brownlee. But I think back to the economy, the question we face is, should the government be borrowing more to become a pump primer and keep the economy going, or is it time for us to actually tighten our belts, stop spending as a nation, and live within our means?
That is the question which we will not find an answer to today, Vincent, but no doubt into the future we will find the result. And thanks very much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
Vincent Heeringa over at Ideologue, ideologue.co.nz.